Alright, what's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from Street Scores, and we got a lot to talk about today as far as everything that's gone down the first 2 days of mini camps. A lot of quotes, a lot of things have gone down. We got to talk about all of the injury situations, especially Curtis Samuel. We got to talk about Tory Mclung and everything Ron Rivera said about him today, as in Wednesday. Of course, he's not showing up to mini camps, which are mandatory, and the Washington Commanders have their right. They're in power to find them if they want to. Also, Jonathan Allen speaks on Jack Del. We'll talk about that very quickly. We'll talk about the Snyder situation also very quickly. Then we're going to dive into Warren Sapp coaching at the Washington Commanders practice today. That was exciting. And then, of course, we got to break down everything that went down in practices, all of the most important things, who had good days, who didn't, who's doing what specifically, all of that type of stuff. So before we dive into all of that, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell next to the subscription button so you get a notification immediately and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Again, like I've already said, I'm still working on my why we need to pay Tory Mclung video, where I'm gonna have a bunch of advanced stats and I'm gonna have some similar contracts to bring up so we can take a look at what Tory Mclung should and probably will end up getting paid, because I'm still optimistic he will. So I'm gonna look at it as if he will get paid and all that type of stuff, not should he get paid. I mean, of course the should he is gonna be provided in the stats, but when we start talking contracts, we're gonna just talk basically what I feel like he will end up getting, because Ron Rivera, we're gonna talk about it in this video. It sounds like Ron Rivera is serious about getting this guy paid. We'll see. And of course, I'm working on a why the Washington Commanders will have a top 5 offensive line video. And I also have another Rico report with a lot of various stuff like different quarterback rankings, disrespecting Carson Wentz, Pro Football Focus coming out with their offensive line rankings, all kinds of stuff like that. So a video just of everything random going down outside of minicamp. So without further ado, let's get it. All right, first of all, let's go ahead and start with the Curtis Samuel and injury updates, man. This Curtis Samuel situation has been very irritating. All right, so first of all, he missed the last OTA session last week. But then, you know, and of course Rivera said that was like out of an abundance of caution. So that was like a precautionary thing. It was wet or something like that. And also he was feeling soreness, something like that. But then he was actually out there for the first day of minicamp and he was running just fine. He looked like he was 100%. And then he missed today's minicamp, the second day of minicamp. So I don't know. He was on the bike. That was pretty much all he was doing, stretching on the bike and things like that. Part of the cycling team once again. And I mean, is this going to be a reoccurring thing? Is this going to be a serious problem? Are they just trying to hide the fact that he's more hurt than he actually is, like they did us last year? It'd be different if we didn't have last year to base our opinions on the situation off of. But like, they played us last year, kept trying to downplay everything, saying week by week we're not sure. And then the man ended up playing maybe like 50 snaps the entire season. So I don't know. At this point, they don't get the benefit of the doubt when it comes to at least Curtis Samuel specifically. I mean, we can discuss quarterbacks. We can discuss the team overall. We can even talk about injuries overall. But Curtis Samuel specifically, they have lost my benefit of the doubt. So I'm just going to have to see it to believe it as of right now. I hope he's fine, but I really don't know, to be completely honest with you, as of right now. Also, Antonio Gibson spoke about his diet and his intense regimen that he's been going through over the offseason. Already talked about it in a previous video. But basically, one of the interesting things that he said most recently is that he played most of last year in the mid-230s and that he didn't often feel his twitchy and explosive best. So he basically wanted to cut some weight and he wants to get back to how explosive he was in college and the reason that we drafted him. And I mean, we always talk about how he's so big and heavy, but still runs like a 4.3 something, like a 4.39, 4.36, something like that. But honestly, last year he didn't have 4.35, 4.36, 4.39 speed, whatever. When he's at 230, he's not that fast. He's not the explosion that we expect. Now, granted, against the Bills, that screen he took, you don't need to be 4.35 speed to do what he did. Whatever that was, that's good enough. But for him to potentially be more explosive than we've seen, especially specifically last year, that's really exciting. Something I'm not gonna super bank on it and be like going around everywhere saying Antonio Gibson's going to be more explosive this year. But, you know, it sounds good. We'll have to see when he hits the field. Also, Logan Thomas spoke about his injury update and everything. He said, quote, "Week 1 would be great, but if not, so be it. Every Monday I feel significantly better," unquote. He also said that he, you know, of course, hopefully can return week 1 and that his knee is feeling good, but we'll see. He said he's happy with the recovery process. He says, of course, he would love to be back, but just gonna have to see. Also, speaking about the other tight ends, especially the young ones, he said that he loves the way the young tight ends work, goes down the list and praises John Bates, Cole Turner, and the rest of the players in the position. So I think we're fine. Of course, you prefer to have Logan Thomas fully healthy. He's your tight end 1. But from what we're seeing with John Bates, as far as blocking in hands, Cole Turner, as far as receiving ability, and his blocking is, of course, not as good as a John Bates and this Logan Thomas for sure as of right now. But it's not terrible. It's definitely improved since he's been drafted from college, and he has the size to be a good blocker. He's not one of those guys where it's lack of size, it's more so lack of technique and discipline, and he's getting noticeably better since we drafted him. So we'll see. Again, he's not as good of a blocker as Logan Thomas, and he's definitely not as good of a blocker as John Bates. He'll probably never be as good of a blocker as John Bates, but then his receiving ability, his ability to get deep down the field, he's learning how to route run better, and then his catch radius, I'm excited. And then, of course, you have a lot of different guys like Sammons Reyes with loads of potential. He's our most physical blocker. He's not the most technically sound, but if we're talking about strength, anger, aggression, physicality, Sammons Reyes is our best blocking tight end. Of course, outside of John Bates, because his technique is just so great. But if we're talking about physicality, Sammons Reyes has the most. I mean, they said out of the whole entire team, honestly, including offensive lineman, he's our most physical blocker. Then you also have Armani Rogers, Curtis Hodges, and we're going to talk about AGG later. They're all looking pretty good in camp so far, and they're all like have loads of potential, loads of athleticism. Curtis Hodges, one of the tallest players on the team. Armani Rogers, arguably one of the most athletic players on the team, and AGG is out here making plays in practice. We're going to talk about that later, though. Also, players that add into the list of guys, we already have like a set few guys that have just been generally hurt so far throughout offseason workouts, but the new guys today were Phidarian Mathis and Cornelius Lucas, who missed because of illness, and then Charles Leno, not exactly sure why he missed practice today, but we do know Phidarian Mathis and Cornelius Lucas missed because of illness. And then just the update with those 2 tackles gone, I mean, those are literally your 2, you have your starting left tackle and then your backup swing tackle, the guy that if Charles Leno or Samuel Cosmi gets hurt, you have Cornelius Lucas that steps up and he's the starter immediately. So with Lucas and Charles Leno gone, Saahdiq Charles stepped up and started at left tackle basically today. Also, John Moscow, a lot of people at the practices said that he was really fired up today. I mean, like completely just cussing people out. He's normally a fired up guy, but they were saying that he was even more fired up than normal today. Maybe it was because you had your starters out, you had one starter and technically your immediate backup, and so maybe guys were making mistakes. I don't know, but apparently John Moscow was like, I mean, they said, he even said, quote, "Now I know why they cut your A word. You can't even hold the F word bag." Like, I mean, he was completely cussed. I mean, he said, "Now I know why they cut you," to a player. Like, it's crazy. So, and then also they said Juan Castillo, the tight ends coach, the new one, remember, we're going from Pete Hainer to Juan Castillo this offseason, so hopefully he can do just as good of a job as Pete Hainer was doing. But apparently he was very animated today as well. A lot of people are saying maybe it was the heat or maybe it was just because guys were making mistakes, but either way, today, even though both of those guys are normally animated, today was a slight difference. Also, moving on to more injuries, Dax Milne was on the side field as well today. I'm not exactly sure what his injury situation was, but he was on the side field. He wasn't participating in team activities. And then also you had Chase Young dragging sleds around. He at first was not out on the field. He was inside getting some rehab work. Then he later came out and he was on the side field working with strength coach Chad Englehart, and he was pulling a weighted sled while running at about 75%. So that's good to hear, man. At the very least, he's 75%, which is not terrible. He could possibly be ready by week 1. Now let's go to this Tory Mclung situation. Well, first of all, probably the biggest headline of the many headlines that Ron Rivera gave us today. He said that the Washington Commanders are not trading holdout wide receiver Tory Mclung, and that he is confident that a deal will get done. He said a lot of things. I mean, he said, quote, "We understand what Terry is trying to do. We want him here. He's going to be here. We believe in him as a football player. I believe they're headed in the right direction when Rivera started talking about contract talks. Rivera also said, quote, "We've been talking with his folks the last week and working on stuff and hopefully taken care of in a matter of time. How much time? Don't know. It's never been contentious. Feeling good and confident that at some time this will get done," unquote. Of course, there's no timetable. I mean, sometime, that's any amount of time. Rivera also said, as far as Mcclung's absence from OTAs and minicamp, he said that it is different from other players. He said, quote, "That's one player," as in Terry. But when you're talking about the entire unit last year as far as the defensive line, we're also talking about a veteran guy, a guy who has been in our system for a couple of years, who understands our system very well. So I'm not concerned about that. I'm really not, as far as Terry Mcclung, because reporters asked him about, like, how you feel about Tory Mctighe missing mini camps as compared to like a lot of the defensive line players missing OTAs last year. And I see what Ron Rivera is trying to say. It's one player this year versus quite a bit of them from last year, but at the same time, he's missing mandatory mini camps. Chase Young, Montez Sweat, none of those guys miss mandatory mini camps. So I think this is a little bit different, kind of in a worse way in that way, but I see what he's saying, where it's one player versus a few last year. Rivera also said, quote, "My thoughts and my only concern is that we continue to work, continue to have dialogue. We're not going anywhere with Terry. We want Terry to be here. Terry's a big part of what we want to do and accomplish as a football team. So we're doing everything we can, and we'll continue to work with it and try to get Terry here to be a part of our football team." So, I mean, he sounds really adamant about getting Terry Mclung signed long-term, especially sooner rather than later, but we'll see. Who knows what's exactly going on? Again, as a fan, I'm optimistic. As an analyst, I'm not sure. And I think it's really interesting too, because if you think about it, one of the main reasons I want to pay Terry Mclung is because what he was able to do with all of the bad quarterbacks he had. But just imagine if Aaron Rodgers was throwing to Terry Mclung this whole time, and now his contract was where it is now and how much we'd have to pay him. That man probably would have been going for 1,300, 1,500 yards a season, and we'd probably be paying that man well over what A.J. Brown got, probably like 28 million plus. So I think that's just a really interesting situation there, because if Terry Mclung actually did have great quarterbacks in these past 3 years since he's been here, then he'd probably be asking for even more money than he currently is. But Ron Rivera also acknowledged the fact that he said that he sees Terry Mclung's deal as a key in shaping the Commanders' reputation. Players on the team, players off the team, as far as being a free agent destination. If you can't pay Terry Mclung, and I've broken it down in more detail in previous videos, even my most recent video, the one right before this one, the one I did 2 days ago, I completely broke down exactly why Terry Mclung needs to get paid, as far as like reputation and how players on the team and off the team looking at our team are gonna look at our organization as far as paying the guys that does everything right. But basically, Ron Rivera is even acknowledging the fact that, yeah, we got to get Terry done, not only just because we're better with them on the field, but also this could affect a lot of things in the future, as far as players that are currently on the team wanting to re-sign here and players that are not on the team wanting to sign here as free agents. And then moving on, just real quick, Jonathan Allen, of course, was asked about Jack Del Rio. A lot of people were. I mean, I'm not sure if y'all saw Cameron Curl basically said, "I'm not going to speak on it because y'all are just going to twist my words," and all the reporters, it was like an awkward silence. I don't know exactly what anybody expected him to say. Did they think they were going to bait him into saying something silly? I just thought that was an obvious answer. That's what I would have said. I didn't even think he dropped any like type of bomb or anything, but I did like the response from him. But I mean, they've been asking everybody. Of course, Carson Winston has been asked, but of course, Jonathan Allen's been asked multiple times over the course of multiple days, and he said, as far as Jack Del Rio's apology to the team this morning, that it was about a 10 to 15 meeting, and he said, quote, "He stood up there like a man and owned up for what he said," unquote. And he also said that he refuses to allow anything Jack Del Rio said to distract him, media members asking him. He also spoke about Twitter in a pretty lengthy quote and basically said he doesn't care what people say on Twitter. And the general gist of it was, if you're not out here working with me every day, sweating, blood, tears, all of that, then I just honestly don't care about what your opinion is. So I definitely respect that, and I'm glad he has that mentality. And then very quickly, of course, just an update on the Snyder situation. A couple of weeks ago, Congress asked Dan Snyder and Roger Goodell to testify in court on their behalf to explain everything that's going on with all of this mess going on with Dan Snyder, of course. And then now it's been reported that Dan Snyder will not testify at the congressional hearing. Quote, "Mrs. Snyder has long-standing plans to be out of the country on business matters at that date," unquote. According to his attorneys, they wrote a whole 4-page letter to the committee. The lawyer says the committee would not entertain alternate dates. So, hey, if you thought you might see Dan Snyder in court, you might as well just go ahead and give up on that. I mean, I knew once they asked him, once it was voluntary, I knew he wasn't pulling up. Even if it was mandatory, I felt like he was going to find a way to get out of it. So I'm not surprised at all. Now moving on to the fun stuff. Warren Sapp was at Washington Commanders practice today, like the real Warren Sapp, as you can see on the picture. Warren Sapp was working with the D-line. He was helping them with their double team drills. He was literally doing everything D-line. He was like the de facto defensive lines coach for the day. And I love that because, I mean, it's always been a lot of reports the past couple of years that the defensive line players don't really like their D-line coach right now. So if Warren Sapp can come in and take over that job, I would love it. I mean, please. I mean, he even had a good quote earlier today when interviewed, because of course everybody wanted to interview him. I mean, it's Warren Sapp, and he said a lot of interesting things, but one of the most interesting quotes that he said was, quote, "The worst 3 words in football are we got it or I got it. You ain't got nothing in this game. You better work on it," unquote. And he's basically saying, like, no matter how sure you are, no matter how good you are, and I think that's a very important thing to say to people like Chase Young and Montez Sweat, who were highly accomplished in college. They were highly touted coming out of college. I think that mentality is great to keep regurgitating to them over and over again every day. That, I mean, no matter how much you think you know, you do not know it all. You need to keep working hard as if you were drafted last in the draft type of thing. So, man, hire Warren Sapp for defensive line. I'm not one of those guys that overreacts when it comes to certain things like Warren Sapp is coaching our D-line. We need to hire him. You know, I'm not normally that guy, but for this, please bring in Warren Sapp. Again, most notably because there's already been widespread reports that our defensive line players just don't like our current defensive lines coach. Also, to let you know how Warren Sapp ended up at the practice, former teammate Martin Mayhew called him about swinging by to help tutor the defensive line at the recommendation of assistant defensive line coach Jeff Zognina. So hey, Martin Mayhew did something good. Not to say he hasn't done anything good before, but you know, that's something that for people that hate Martin Mayhew, at least that could make you a little bit happier about him being our almost GM as of right now. At least he could pull some strings and get that done, I guess. And now let's get to the main part of this video, the mini camp practice notes, some of the most notable things that went down. Well, most important, let's start with that. Deron Payne, who was there at voluntary OTAs for the past couple of weeks, he never participated in team drills, and then he completely skipped the last day of OTAs, I believe, but he was there at mandatory mini camps, and not only was he there, but he was finally participating in team drills. So that's good to hear. He's finally like fully with the team, is fully involved now that everything is mandatory. Now moving on to Carson Wentz, I'm hearing multiple reports that this was probably Carson Wentz's most up and down day. He had some of his best throws of offseason workouts so far, but he also had some of his worst ones. So it was kind of the Carson Wentz experience in practice today. Usually for the past couple of weeks, Carson Wentz has actually been more consistent and has actually looked pretty good, which, you know, is OTAs. The offense is supposed to literally beat the defense, literally set up for them to win. So I wasn't necessarily surprised, and I just didn't know how much to actually buy that. And so now that we're finally seeing Carson Wentz have a Carson Wentz-like day, you know, it was only a matter of time. Not going to read into his good days too much. I'm not going to read into his Carson Wentz-like days too much, but we'll see. And speaking of one of his highlights, Carson Wentz found Jahan Dotson down to the left sideline. He fitted in a very tight window. And again, this just goes to what I was speaking about in previous videos. Every week, Carson Wentz and Jahan Dotson gain better chemistry. It's not just being able to get the ball to your receiver. It's whenever Jahan Dotson is running any particular route, if the ball is going to get there where it needs to be and when it needs to be there. If it's late, if it's short, if it's high, if it's early. And so far, I mean, the past few weeks, every week it's been getting better and better. Jahan Dotson is running a route. As soon as he makes his break, before he's even technically open yet, Carson Wentz is throwing the ball, and by the time Jahan Dotson is open, the ball is already there. And that's just unmatched chemistry. That's just something you can't cover in the NFL as far as a defense goes. So I love the fact that that chemistry is gaining there. But it is noteworthy that Carson Wentz does not have that chemistry with Tory Mclaurin yet. Also, Sam Howell overall didn't have a bad day, but he did have a interception to Trey Walker, and that's more so good news for Trey Walker, the fact that he's making an impact. It was the first interception of the day. Also, De'Ami Brown had a nice catch in traffic during the 9-on-9 drills, and remember, he had that big collision with Jeremy Reeves, and people were worried about if he'd be okay. Sounds like he's okay. So, I mean, the play he made isn't very noteworthy. I just wanted to tell y'all about the play that he made to bring up the fact that he looks like he's 100%, no concussion, no nothing like that. He's good to go. Also, John Bates, just an update, had a great one-handed grab, and that's just to reiterate the fact that John Bates is a great blocker, but he also has really good hands. If it's thrown his way, he's coming down with it. He may not have the catch radius of a Cole Turner, but if it touches his hands, he's coming down with it. He's not a great route runner, he's not a great separator, but if you can get the ball where it needs to be, John Bates will come down with it. He's not like just only a blocking tight end. He can be somewhat of a dual threat tight end as well. Also, Antonio Gandy Golden, speaking of tight ends, made a lot of good plays today. Most notably, Carson Wentz threw it up to him, corner of the end zone, one of them little fade route things, and Antonio made like a Randy Moss-like catch and came down with it. So we'll see if Antonio Gandy Golden ends up making the team, especially as a tight end so far. I've only heard and seen positive things, but he has a lot of names to beat out, so we'll see. Also, Jahan Dotson, of course, the theme has been nobody can cover him, but the only guy giving them problems is Benjamin St-Juste, and that happened again today. In 2-minute drills with 4 seconds left on the clock, Wentz threw a pass to Jahan Dotson. It was incomplete because Benjamin St-Juste was defending him. He stuck with Jahan Dotson in the slot and prevented a touchdown. Also, Percy Butler stepped up and made a really impressive interception in the end zone. I mean, he read the route perfectly and everything, and then he had to dive for it. He had to jump real high. Oh, it was crazy. So Percy Butler's finally starting to make positive plays. He's been one of the guys that I wouldn't say is a disappointment, but you know, a lot of the draft picks like Cole Turner, Jahan Dotson, even Phidarian Mathis, Brian Robinson, all of those guys have been impressing so far, whereas Percy Butler was the guy that, I mean, of course, if you're talking about the guys that are the most raw that we drafted within the first 5 rounds, you can argue with Sam Howell and Percy Butler at free safety. So I wasn't surprised that he had a slower start than a lot of the other draft picks, but now he's out there finally making plays, and he's making those type of plays where it's like only Percy Butler can make that with the athleticism. And now that he's mentally starting to catch up to the game of football, it was nothing physical. He has all the tools physically. Now that he's mentally starting to catch up and get more comfortable, of course he's starting to make plays. And that has me really excited because Percy Butler is one of my favorite picks of the draft, potential and ceiling wise, so that's really good to hear. Plus, I just think overall, ultimately, if Percy Butler ends up being who I think he can be, he'll basically just be a better version of Bobby McCain and will basically take over that job at some point. And just to let you know, the interception was against Taylor Heineke. And speaking of Taylor Heineke throwing interceptions, he also threw another interception to Corn Elder. So it sounds like he's having a good camp. He's probably cornerback 4, to be completely honest. It's actually crazy. Cornerback 4, at the very least cornerback 5. I do expect him to make the roster. Now, I talked about the Sam Howell interception earlier, but overall, he actually had a really good day. It was reported that rookie quarterback Sam Howell was fitting the ball through some tight windows during 2-minute drills. He delivered a pass to Jared Patterson between 2 defenders and hit Markin Michel, who's having a really good camp. I mean, maybe an unsung hero to make the roster. That's Sony Michel's brother, I believe. And y'all know Sony Michel. I'm a Georgia Bulldog fan, so I'm rooting for Markin Michel for sure. And Sam Howell was able to hit him near the sideline. And it's also really interesting too because somebody pointed out that Howell, who is experiencing what it's like to be a backup quarterback for the first time since 7th grade, is trying his best to fit into the role behind Heineke and Carson Wentz. He won't be competing anytime soon, but it's encouraging to see him settle into the offense. Again, like I said, like last week, couple of weeks ago, Sam Howell, of course, is still the 3rd string quarterback, but he is further ahead in his development than we expected at this point in the offseason. So that's very encouraging. Sam Howell looks better at this point than I thought he would. He still doesn't look like a starter, but he looks better than I thought he would, and that has me really happy. Also, speaking of the Saahdiq Charles from earlier, with him stepping up, basically starting the left tackle, he did have a good day today. It's been reported that he performed well in the role and had a solid rep against James Smith-Williams. Speaking of Markin Michel, apparently he was even making good plays with Cole Kelly at quarterback. So that's really interesting. I mean, no matter who's throwing on the ball, he's making plays. Taylor Heineke, Sam Howell, and Cole Kelly have all been able to find a way to hit him. Whether it be a big play down the field or as a 2-minute drill where the windows are tighter, that man is making plays, man. Markin Michel, unsung hero. Watch out. Also, I'm hearing a lot of reports that Brian Robinson is showing some great vision right now. He's able to make crazy cuts. He's seeing the hole before it opens up, and he's getting there right when he needs to, and it's resulting in big gains that if he didn't have that type of vision, he wouldn't be getting. And going back to the cornerback 4 discussion, JP Finlay brought up a good point that who honestly is cornerback 4? Of course, Benjamin St-Juste, William Jackson, and Kendall Fuller are your top 3, and it looks like Benjamin St-Juste is still in light right now. He's our best corner so far in the offseason, and he's our starting slot corner, which is a big hole that we needed filled. So that's huge. I mean, he's just killing 2 birds, 1 stone right there. I'm so glad we have him. I don't know what we'd be doing without Benjamin St-Juste at this point. I'm not gonna lie. And then that just takes me to the point, who's cornerback for? Is it Danny Johnson technically in the slot? Is it Cornelder outside? Are we going to take a look at maybe some veterans? Tory Mctighe looked really good until he had that crazy injury against the Falcons on the very last play of the drive, a Hail Mary. Are we going to bring him back? Because I really liked what I saw from him before that. And the fact that he was even playing against the Falcons lets you know, like, he was worthy of being on the field. He was playing regular season games. And then also, like JP Finlay said, who's linebacker number 3 after Jamin Davis and Cole Holcomb? Is it David Mayo? But all he can do is stop the run. You don't want him to cover at all. You have Khaleke Hudson, who at times in practice today was actually playing with the ones over Jamin Davis, but I'm still not exactly sure about him as well. So we'll see. And also, speaking of Jamin Davis, apparently while doing red team drills with the second team, he fell down badly when trying to contain Heineke on a run. And so it sounds like he had a decent day. Other than that, that was just a really bad play. Just looked really bad on that play. And speaking of Jamin Davis, when he was at the podium, he said, quote, he feels way more confident in year 2, unquote. His play speed is improved and he's focused on playing fast. He also said the last season was a humbling experience, and I bet it was. I bet it was, boy. And then lastly, special teams again. McGowan, Ezra, Erickson, Milne, and Dotson are the ones fielding punts. Again, I think he's just going to be too valuable as a starting wide receiver to actually be the guy that ends up fielding punts. I think Dax Milne is a safe option. I think Alex Erickson is a guy with a lot of potential. He's the more explosive option. You have Jaquez Ezzard, who I'm rooting for. He's from Atlanta. He's another guy where it's like high ceiling, but is he dependable? Again, Dax Milne is your dependable guy, and then you also have McGowan in the mix. No more Jared Patterson though, which is interesting. It was fun while it lasted in preseason. I don't know what happened after that, but he's not even getting looks as far as a returner goes right now. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Warren Sapp for defensive lines coach, Terry McLaurin's contract situation, the injuries, especially Curtis Samuel, Logan Thomas, Chase Young, Chase Roulier, all of those guys. All of the stuff, the practice notes, who's having good days, who's having bad days, who's making plays, who's not, all of that type of stuff. So man, I appreciate all of the support, man. Shouts out to all of my sponsors, especially my Pro Bowl sponsors whose name you see scrolling on the screen right now. Man, I really appreciate y'all. I'll catch y'all later. I'm out.